that's only half the battle. Because until you're put in situations and you're forced to think about, okay, what's the ethical thing to do, you haven't been tested. And if you're in a context or an industry or an organization that has any level of unprofessional, unethical conduct, you will be tested. Many of the students in this room will be tested. The judge who I clerked for gave me a wonderful lesson. He related the story of his first ethical dilemma, which involved a discovery dispute, something many lawyers are familiar with. And he said he chose a certain path that he thought was the right one and ended up going to that firm's management committee because the client wasn't totally happy with the choice. And he said he was so glad he had done that because once he made that choice and said he could be okay, he was able to be more confident. And he said, anytime any of you have to face that type of ethical dilemma, feel free to call him. And so let me give something to all of our students. Anytime any of you face an ethical dilemma, you are not alone. I and others here at Chicago Law are here for you. The Daniels Fund is led by two exceptional people here, Linda and Bo, who really are entrepreneurial in the sense that they thought, you know what, a law school could be part of this consortium. And I think it's a fabulous addition for our students to be a part of this consortium. You notice this is mostly all other business schools and us. And part of what this is exciting for us is the world that we live in is a world that requires collaboration. Whether you are in the government sector, a company, a consulting firm, a non-for-profit, very few of us are going to work alone. Most of us are going to work in concert with others, and that is indeed where lots of the issues arise. To say a few words about the ambit of what we're doing here at Colorado Law Initiative, I want to ask Amy Griffin, who is overseeing the program, to take us first.
Thank you and welcome. We are really very fortunate to be a part of the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative, especially now with legal education in such a state of transition. There are actually a lot of talented and thoughtful people across the country who are thinking about this issue. How do we develop our students' abilities to respond to recognize even ethical problems? How do we help our students, as the Dean talked about already, develop their ethical professional identity? And the Daniels Fund is helping us to do just that. We're very fortunate to already have here on the faculty a number of really talented people to teach our students legal ethics, and so we have that foundation to build from. And we're building on that in really a number of different directions and trying to be experimental and try new things. I'll just highlight a few of the things that we're working on to give you a sense. With our curriculum, we are both expanding and experimenting with our traditional legal ethics course that every law student takes. So we have a number of faculty members who've innovated with that, like Professor Deb Cantrell, who tried teaching ethics in a really innovative and different, reflective, sort of interactive way. We also have brand new courses, a course taught by Professor Harry Surden on problem solving and decision making, courses in entrepreneurship taught by the Dean and taught by Professor Bernthal. So lots of things happening in the curriculum, and we're looking to find more ways to incorporate ethics into already existing courses. On the extracurricular front, it's a long list of things. I'll just give you a few highlights. We're looking to engage our students more directly with members of the legal community so that they can learn from them and sort of directly engage on issues of ethics. We're looking to expand our programming for students who are in externships and clinics so they can reflect on those actual experiences they're having and learn from the ethical dilemmas that they might confront in those situations. We also have two new training programs for lawyers, for law students, to help them with the transition from the academic world to the real world. One of them is a 4-week boot camp for students before they go into a summer position with the business. The other is a full-day workshop for first-year students that this year, for the first time, with the help of the Daniels Fund, we are making mandatory. So every single first-year student will go through this transition program to help them really directly confront ethical and professional issues before they head out to their first summer job. So that's just a few of the things to give you a sense of what we're working on now. Turn it back over to
All right, so the way we're going to do this is I'll have John Ikard in a minute give you some context on FirstBank as an organization. The topic is one he chose, which is leading an ethical organization in a sometimes unethical world. For those who follow the financial services industry, around the Great Recession, you may have heard the famous phrase, and Eric Burton's here to help me. I think it was the head of Citicorp who said, while the music's going, you have to stay on the dance floor. And the dance floor was making loans that you believed were not going to actually be able to be paid back, or getting mortgages that you thought were really suspect. There was a lot of pressure on a lot of businesses to do practices that, if you got someone to stop, reflect, and be honest, might have said, you know, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. FirstBank, in an extraordinary testament to its culture, stayed on the path of banking, which is one of being a pillar of the community and an honorable profession. And we have Bill Johnson here, who's chair of the board. That history and culture is going to be part of what we're going to hear about. Then I'm going to have a conversation, and it will be sort of fireside chat-like. Then I'm going to ask a few students to offer questions. So students, you are now warned. I don't need to tell a few of you in advance, but those who know me, you should know that you could be asked to ask a question. And I'm doing it because I know you have great questions, and you might be too deferential to others. I'm also going to ask us to circulate these note cards that we'll have Julianne or someone else collect, so that if you have questions you think, you can give them to me. I don't know what time for everyone's question, but I'll try to get them in. So with that, let me have John say a few words. He started after he graduated from CSU as a teller, has been with FirstBank his entire career. He is now head of the American Bankers Association, which is the premier organization for community banks. FirstBank has developed in this region and really has a stellar reputation for compliance, for caring about their customers. And we at Colorado Law feel a lot of personal affinity for those who know the name Ira Rothgerber. You know some of that. Ira was there at the founding. Ira named the Rothgerber competition, which we'll have next week, in honor of his dad, who was a judge. Ira also has been one of our best patrons and sort of real beloved figures. The firm that is still known as the Rothgerber firm is represented here tonight, and that's a firm that does a lot of work with FirstBank. So John is part of our family here, and we're thrilled to have you in our inaugural Daniels Fund Ethics Lecture.
Well, thank you, Bill. Yeah. Ira Rothgerber actually started our bank back in 1963, so we have some pretty good genes going back to CU going back 52 years or so. When I worked at CU Law School, I was thinking of the story of my roommate at college at CSU with Bill Ritter. And I went into banking, and Bill came here to law school. And obviously after that, he became DA and he came to Denver, the governor. About 2009, 10, when things really hit the fan in the banking world, got pretty ugly for bankers. So I went to see Bill at the governor's office. We were talking about something. I said, hey, Bill, FirstBank just got ethics and business award. He goes, they give an ethics award to a bank? And I remember thinking, yeah, okay. And we argued about who was lower on the public opinion poll, bankers or lawyers. And we argued about that for a while. We kind of decided both about the same, but thank God for Congress. But I think the issue there is that, you know, we go back, everybody talks about ethics, and I agree with Bill. You know, I met a guy over the weekend, I told him I was going to be giving this ethics speech, and he said, you know, why do you teach ethics? People don't know right and wrong. I always know right and wrong. I was thinking, well, I said like, wow, you're pretty amazing, but I felt like you're an idiot. Because nobody always knows right and wrong. I think people with the highest moral character, I think people with the best integrity are the ones that constantly question their ethics. If you're not constantly questioning those situations, then you're not very introspective. So I would encourage you, if you have doubts, and you're always questioning it, you're like the guy who always knows the right thing to do. Those are the kind of guys you should stay away from. Our company was founded in 1963. We were Colorado banks. We were the second largest bank in Colorado for about $15 billion. And we were about the third largest privately held bank in the country. Now, every bank says they're unique. But I'm gonna tell you why we really are unique. We have two things that make us very unique. We are basically employee owned. Our officers, directors, employees, we're the ones that own the bank. So we're responsible for how that bank does. Plus, like Bill says, we're about 2,200 employees, about 350 officers. And every one of our officers, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3, starts the training. I started the training on the top. I've been there 34 years. The president's been there 33 years. He started the training. These 4 officers over here, they all probably 5 to 25 years, trainees, all 5 of them. We only promote from within. So you develop this culture. And so you know exactly, the same kind of integrity and culture, and you sort of know who you are. And someone from Georgia said, like, wow, your system sounds like the banking version of movie Deliverance. Because we're all kind of inbred. I said that's kind of true. I don't think that was a compliment. But so what it was, basically, we're all kind of on the same page. It starts with our roster, or it starts with our board, and Bill Johnson, and goes down from there. One other thing about FirstBank is our performance. Banking, and we'll talk about banks in a little while. People don't really know who banks are and what banks are not. That's probably good to differentiate. Back in 2007, 2008, when things really got nasty, banks really got in trouble. You heard of TARP. TARP is what they used to bail out banks. Well, we didn't take TARP in 2008, and we had record profits that year. Then things got really bad in 2009. We had record profits again. Then 2010, it got really bad. We had record profits in 10. We had profits in 11, record profits in 12, record profits in 13, and 14. Every year, record profits. People say, well, what did you do? It's very simple. It's what we didn't do. We don't have a trading desk. We don't have derivatives. We don't have wealth management. We don't do subprime loans. We don't do subprime credit cards. We don't do any of that stuff. We just take deposits, make loans, lots of mortgage loans, people that can repay loans. And we make lots of commercial real estate loans. And we're the biggest church lender in town. And we're the biggest lender to nonprofits, because that's where you find the best people. We're very simple. People come to us and say, well, how do you make a lot of money? And they look at it and go, well, that doesn't make any sense. It makes sense. And what we're trying to show as a company, we certainly accept our company, but you can make a lot of money and be very successful and do it the right way. And I think that's where our legacy is. And even at the height of the, we're back in about 2010, there were millions of foreclosures going on, millions. FirstBank, we have about 30,000 real estate loans on our books. We have about 25 foreclosures. 25. Why is that? Because, number one, we make sure people can, when they take out the loan, make sure they pay it. Because we own the bank, I want that person to pay it, I'm not going to sell it for them. And number two, when somebody gets into trouble, you don't just foreclose. You go talk to them and say, what's the problem? What's going on? If it's a legitimate reason, let's defer the payment. Or let's maybe do a deed in lieu, give us the house, we'll pay you to move on. Or let's do something different, let's restructure the loan. Because trust me, banks don't want your house back. We never make money in that deal, I'm a big loser. I've heard people say, well, you stole my house back. No, I want that house back. So the key is keep people in their house, keep the community together. Because once you start foreclosing a neighborhood, the whole neighborhood goes to hell. So we had a handful of foreclosures. That's all we did. Because we made sure we're talking to the customer because, we all live in Colorado. 99% of our assets are in Colorado. We're only as strong as the state is. And since we live here, we got to make sure this place is good for us. And so that's our philosophy. It's very simple. Very simple. It's not very dynamic. It's not very complicated. We make mistakes along the way, but we try to do the right thing. We actually thought about doing subprime. I was looking at subprime in like 06. It was so profitable. But this is fantastic business. We got to do this. So I got in together and saw the subprime. And we put a few rules in place, like there could be a cadaver, it could be, we found out, after the first report, we'd done 2 loans. Because we required the customer to be able to show they could repay the loan. And most of them didn't do that. So we stopped doing that business. We did 2 subprime loans. Because we couldn't get to that point where, even though we were selling loans, We thought it was bad to tell our officers, but you know something, let's do this. When you sell those loans to government, they can be cracked. But if you're gonna keep it, it better be a good loan. What an awful message to send to your officers. What an awful way to train. We were talking about that during training one time, they're all kind of sitting there going, ooh, I don't like that. But that's the kind of people we hire, they don't like that. So we have two loans, one with that, which is a normal default rate, 50%. But we do it because we just did what we want to do.
So I start on a personal note about leadership, and one phrase that some people use is authentic leadership, which means being who you are. And those who know John knows that. It's a real character trait. And being willing to acknowledge when you make mistakes. Could you start by talking a little bit about how you set that tone? Because a lot of unethical behavior happens when people don't want to acknowledge mistakes and become trite sometimes to say it's not the mistake, it's the cover-up that really gets people in trouble.
Well, we all have big egos, and nobody ever likes to admit a mistake. So you better have some pretty good people around you to have a will to tell you, like, hey, that's really dumb. That's really stupid. You know, I look at CEOs around the country, we meet quite a few, and I notice the ones that are the most arrogant, the ones that are most difficult, the ones that are off track. If there's nobody around to tell them they're doing the wrong thing. I surround myself with a couple officers that really will say, hey, John, that's not a very smart thing to do. My first reaction was really be mad, like, don't tell me what to do, I'm the CEO. And then after a while, on the way home, you thought, oh, okay, that's right. If one of them tells me it's wrong, I can argue, but two of them, like, okay, because I respect these people. I respect these people. And I'll tell you, if you admit you're wrong, your estimation in their eyes shoots up. They admire you more if you admit you're wrong. Here's one thing that we've been doing in O'Brien's work. It's this, I won't get into all the details, we're promoting people to EVP. It's this long process. And my first out of the box was a terrible program. It was awful. So I changed it, and it got to be worse. And then I changed it back. Well, I just stood in front of my friends and said, hey guys, I really messed this up. I'm going to start all over. Let's just start from scratch. Because everybody knew you messed it up. It was a bad system. Rhymes were working. It was bad, right? It was bad. But now it's good. Everybody's good? That's good. So, but, you know, it's interesting. When I see somebody admit a mistake, I have more respect for them. You know, I think that in our organization, you can get away with admitting mistakes and be part. You know, I mean, I think one of my mentors years ago told me, he said, you know, John, I would never fire you for not making a decision. I'm sorry. I would never fire you for making a wrong decision, but I will fire you for not making a decision. That's what that was really good advice. And so when people make a mistake, okay, they make sure they bring it up and talk about it. Don't hide it. You could get fired. You won't be fired for making a bad decision, but you can get fired for hiding it.
So let's follow up on that. How do you get people in your organization to believe that, to be willing to ask questions, acknowledge when they make mistakes, or admit that it's wrong? Because there's this temptation a lot of people have, this voice in their head, oh, I can't ask that question, or I can't admit it is wrong because they're going to think I'm dumb. So the reason why we call in students in law school is people have that voice in their head saying, I can't ask a question because I won't look smart. And that voice, I often say, is the devil, because it gets people to do bad things, whereas people are saying, you know what, I'm not afraid to ask questions or admit maybe it's wrong. You get to a better place. So how do you help people get past what often is a natural resistance to admitting they made a mistake or asking for clarification?
Once a month, we have a charge-off meeting. That's where we bring back loans to a big group of people like this. You talk about your loan, how bad it was. You have to kind of say, this is my loan, this is what I did wrong, this is stupid. It's very traumatic because you have to admit you made a bad loan. I used to be just whip and chains and wear sackcloth and beat them up, and I thought, that was awful. Now it's, okay, let's talk about what happened. What did you do wrong? You know, let's talk about the downside. Okay, we all made that mistake. You make it a more positive argument. So they're okay making it. It used to be after the charge-offs, loans would die for 3 weeks, but no one would make a loan after the going for that. But if you make it more of a positive, like, okay, let's, and I try to think a lot of times when I see an officer that's really struggling, I say, you know, I would make that loan. That's the one I would make. They're kind of like, I would make that loan. Yeah, and I think this, you see that in very unique situations. You can see when some officers really really have a bad name, it's really upset. You know, I'm not upset. So most of my women make mistakes. I just think that gives you a chance. That's hard people say, I can make mistakes. And you don't fire people for making mistakes. Nobody gets fired for making mistakes. Now, you make lots of mistakes, that's your normal first business. But don't ever fire somebody for making a mistake. That's the best way to chill. You're going to fire somebody. You always do it with respect and make sure people always say, why does FirstBank pay such a great severance package? It's because it's not the person you're firing, it's everybody else. They're watching how you treat that person. They like Bobby. And maybe Bobby wasn't a good officer, but he needs to go, but hey, they really treated Bobby well. So Bobby's gone, he's out of my life. Everybody else is still here. And you know, they treated him or her really well. If I have a problem, I need to leave, they're going to treat me well. So when you fire somebody, it's not the one you fire, it's people in the organization that are watching. So you better make sure you do that right.
One thing that you clearly have thought about at FirstBank to become a real institutional strength is you have a culture. Every organization has a culture, whether they know it or not. It might be an ethical culture, it might not. It might be a caring culture, it might not. The interesting point made by Simon Sinek, Start With Why, I recommend a TED Talk to everybody, is on this point. If you thought about your organization as a family, would you fire a family member? You would try to work with them. And then maybe if they couldn't do something, you would do it with a lot of compassion. That's a powerful point. And during the Great Recession, companies that did everything they could to hold on to people were rewarded by loyalty. That takes a long-term perspective. One point I often say on ethics is acting ethically is in your long-term self-interest. It might not be in your short-term self-interest. In the short term, you might say, you know what, we can make a little bit more money if we didn't do that severance package. How do you keep that long-term perspective in mind when everyone faces short-term pressures?
Well, the fact that privately held is a big deal because we don't have to worry about corporate problems. And our board, starting with Roger, Bill Johnson, Jim Lyons on our board, I didn't invent this culture. I mean, I'm a trainee, I walked into it, and I'm now the steward of it, make sure I treat it correctly and pass it on. That culture was there. Roger Reicher was our founder, really unique guy, but he was Mr. Culture. And that's where I learned culture. And so we all learned the culture. And the fact that, think about it, you got 350 people, they all grew up there. They all started as trainees, they were all there for 20 years. You walk into that room like, whoa, this is really a weird group of people. Because they're like all the same. But they're not all the same. They're different personalities, different backgrounds. But they have the same ethical background. They have the same sense of sharing a community. They have the same sense of just ethics. And they care about stuff. And you're right, most the problem with ethical situations that always cost you money right now. That's why it's a pain. I want to make money right now, and ethically, it's always a short-term thing.
So let me tell two stories. One involves Bill Daniels. One is, I don't think apocryphal, but it involves Gary Berg, who's in a law school. He said he was representing a client negotiating some number of business deal, and they were $500,000 apart. They were in different locations. And it was a huge deal, hundreds of millions of dollars. And he said, you know what? Let's just flip on it. And so Gary's client, the other guy said Gary's client one flip. So Gary's client flipped. And the other guy said tails. And Gary's client said tails. And Gary said, is it really tails? He said, no, but that's the best $500,000 I ever spent, because now it trusts me that I'm not trying to cheat him. The other guy didn't see the coin, so he had said the other, it was heads, the other guy would know. The Bill Daniels story was he owned the Utah NBA franchise, right, where he had all these investors, and the team went bankrupt, and he then paid them all back later. He didn't have to, but he wanted to make right by them. If you're an investor in Bill Daniels' business, you know he's going to have back. That's a long-term perspective that people are thinking you trust. So one of the things Ross about is your reputation is a long-term asset. You have to guard it. As you build this culture, how do you get that perspective across to people? If you're making loans to deals all the time, and it's going to be tempting, you can cut this corner with a little bit more money. How do you get that across?
Well, a lot of bankers go to banks with that. So they go to bank, question the bank, and not bank, or the U.S. bank, or anything else. All of our people, they look at those banks, like here's over here. It's going to impact their loans. So you need to take a look at the great losses of 08, 09, 10, because you disconnect the decision and the profit commission from the open company. You don't disconnect the social security, not the commission. If you disconnect those two, the responsibility for the actual short-term benefit, you got a bad situation. We keep our loans. I make bad loans. I gotta collect it. And it comes out of my profits, it comes out of my bonus, and it comes out of our organization's equity. So I own that. So going in, and knowing that I own it, I'm gonna be here. I can't not leave. So I said, it's gotta be right for me to win. You know, we always say bad loans are made during good times. You always make your bad loans during good times. Because they have good times, or they won't. You know, but you gotta make sure if I know, I'm gonna make it slow, if I know, I gotta make sure it's a good loan, because I'm not gonna collect this. If it goes bad, I'm just stand up and charge off, and then say, why I made this bad loan. So I think one of the really great problems of the financial crisis was we separated the commission benefit from long-term responsibility. And that those don't connect up. Why would there be the sense of caring about them?
So another challenge with leadership is having visibility and knowing what's happening in your organization. Some CEOs can get cut off and are not sensitive to all that's happening. How do you stay engaged? There are a lot of people in the company, you can't know them all personally, but how do you maintain a presence and engagement as a leader?
Yeah, our loan committee meets every Wednesday. We'll probably have 40 to 50 officers there. And that's sort of the central point where you talk to people and you get to know them. It's one big camaraderie. It's more than loan committee. It's just getting together and talking about what's going on in the world. Most of the presidents, sometimes a year, like the year of our president, I watch the staff once a year on staff. And I think that's the fact that you see the people all the time. That's really the key. I have to force myself to make sure. I was forced to be around these people. That's not right. But I have to make sure, like, I need to get that name because that's where everybody's going to be. Just walk around and talk to people. And you know, we're promote these officers. We're making them vice presidents and EVPs. I didn't know who they are. And I also enjoy it. It's just sort of a nice break. There's a real positive camaraderie there. And I really got my back. I just know that regardless of what happens at FirstBank, I can screw up. But I know my bank presidents have my back. It's really nice feeling to know that they're for you.
So one of the real challenges in any organization, something that lawyers deal with a lot, is the need to integrate, and I'll try to define these words, entrepreneurial initiative or entrepreneurial mindset, which means, hey, how might we do this differently? You want people thinking, could we do this better? And that's important. On the other side, you might call it compliance processes. The way you stay on the up and up is you have certain controls. Ethical controls that make sure things are working the way they're supposed to. Sometimes in some organizations, and lawyers sometimes are painted as part of this, it's everything, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that, because we have our processes and the rigid. Other times, it's Wild West freewheeling, and people are doing all sorts of stuff, and the organization ends up going bankrupt because they couldn't even keep track of what's happening. How do you manage that potential tension?
Well, we have a very strong culture and regulatory compliance in our DNA. You know, it's interesting, when I grew up a lender, and I became president of FirstBank at Denver Tech Center, and I just hated these rules, like, oh, rules. And we always called it FirstBank a tech session, because everything was exception down there. And I was proud of that. I thought, hey, we make exceptions, we're doing this, we're doing money, this is great. And then I got to the holding company, the other side of the fence. I thought, we can't do this. We can't have 25 officers out there being the Mavericks. They've got to comply. I don't mind if they're going to be entrepreneurs, but my behavior at the tech center was not acceptable. There's a lot of good ways to do that. You know, we were very successful. We got lucky, but I thought that is really not the way to do it. So it's funny, once you're on the other side of the fence, now I really like a strong audit. I like a strong overview. I like a strong compliance because it keeps everybody out of trouble. So it's funny, it's just your point of view. And so you need to make, it's almost based on your perspective. And I have these conversations with presidents all the time. Some of the more maverick ones, I say, he can't do that. Well, John, no, he can't do that. This is why. Because it's not that you want to totally destroy their sense of entrepreneurship, but banks gotta play by the rules. We are so regulated. And we have fantastic relationships with our regulators. One of the things that makes me most proud is the Federal Reserve is our primary regulator. The Federal Reserve sends their new people the FirstBank to do their exams. They want to show them how it should be done. And I was so proud to hear that. I thought, well, that's pretty cool. They actually think we do it right. They want to come to their people and watch our system as a place to train. And trust me, as a bank, You hear some of these bankers get mad at regulators, this and that. That is such a dumb thing to do. Treat your regulator well. Bend over backwards. Yes, sir, no, sir. Be compliant. And they will make your life so much easier. That's why, that comes probably from Ira Rothberger and Roger Reicher, who probably was there. But he had a few fights with regulators. But he had people around him that kind of growl, please no.
It's that, compliance and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, Roger was a little more feisty. He's more feisty. But luckily we had cooler guys around it. But, there is a sense of people don't like to be told what to do. They don't like to follow the rules. They don't like to be told they can't be creative. They don't like to be told I can't do that. So they're going to be a big part of the organization. You will be bureaucratic, but you don't think about the rules. So as long as the rules are totally arbitrary. Here's an interesting kind of ethical deal. Basically, we pay our new account employees commissions for selling checking accounts, debit accounts, credit cards, like that thing. At one of our banks, we had one employee that was cheating. And she was doing stuff that wasn't supposed to. She was filling out the forms wrong. We fired her. A while later, we had a whole market that was cheating. The entire market was cheating. And someone said, we got to fire them. I said, no. If one person cheats, they're a cheater. If the whole market cheats, your program is bad. You have the wrong program. We hire good people. They're honest people, and they all feel they have to cheat. So let's step back and our goals are too aggressive. Because these are good people. We don't hire cheats that are cheating. We hire good people that are cheating. So the whole bank's cheating. Let's figure out what the thing is. We change the fire goals. So I think it's got to be careful about being able to read. When you see things like that seem unethical, maybe it's because you created an unethical situation. So, but it was interesting. I remember thinking, wait a minute, if everybody's cheating, that's our problem. It was sort of a different way to look at it.
Well, that gets back to you're modeling the behavior. You're owning it yourself. You're not trying to put it off on someone else. In terms of challenges that are coming up, let me talk about two, and then I'll get some students asking questions and then people in the audience as well. First is social media and email to a lesser extent as a real game changer in how people communicate. And one issue we talked about before is the implications for privacy. There is a real need for privacy and discretion in banking. In social media, in some sense, is premised on nothing's private. How has that challenge manifested itself, and how have you dealt with it?
Well, I'm just looking around at a lot of millennials here. It's sort of I look at my four daughters, my three daughters and my son who's here in Mount Juliet. But there's not really a sense of privacy. There's no sense that they have confidentiality. I mean, I always make the joke that I noticed one kid, he would put his tax return on Facebook and train the IRS. That's his idea of privacy. So when people come in today, we have to say, look, financial statements are very confidential. These discussions are very confidential. They're like, well, what do you mean I can't tell it? No, you can't tell you this. Can I do Twitter? No, you can't tweet. Like, well, this guy's got our money, I can't tweet that. Well, no, you don't tweet that. And it's not that they're unethical, it's that they just don't come in with the idea like, this is confidential, this is black and white. This is the gray area. This is black and white. You do not share this information with anybody. You share it with your family. So you have to kind of remind people that. In my age, we were so thankful to have a job. Oh, yeah, whatever you're talking about, but now it's like, hey, there's 6 months, the dress codes were kind of spiking. You guys told you didn't like it. No, you did. That worked. But I do think you do have to kind of think about that. Millennials do. There is a different work-life balance we have to be aware of. It's more important to people. We have found we've attracted a lot of people because they really like the fact we are the second largest philanthropic giver in the state of Colorado. Not just banks, but anybody. Young people like that. They say, hey, we like the way you guys do that. That's pretty cool. We want to work for you because we really do that. And we use that as a sales technique. To me, when I was saying, like, well, I don't care if we give away. It's up to you. But now it's like, yeah, that resonates with me. So the downside is you have to constantly remind young people that confidential. Don't tweet. Don't put on your Facebook. I had a really bad experience with hire people for that. You just have to be confidential, because that's what makes them confidential.
So let me turn to our students, and this is affectionately being called the wiser rule, which is we first have a question come from students. I'm not afraid to call on some, but if anyone is willing to ask questions.
Yes.
So my question relates to ethics, and specifically, I think a lot of what you said at least resonated with me, and it comes down to being part of a good ethical organization. That's the ideal. When you're in a situation, especially as a beginning lawyer, you're not always in a position to call the shots. And so you have to balance your own kind of ethical underpinnings with being deferential to the person that you're reporting to, their experience, their knowledge. Do you have any kind of tips or pointers for how to kind of navigate that gray area?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I've had situations where I've had presidents do stuff I thought, that's not really ethical. What do? Do you call him out? Do you call his boss? You just sort of live with it and kind of roll through. One thing I have found though is I got more experience. Some of the things I thought that were ethical, I just didn't understand the whole picture. Now now I get why you do that, why you enforcing that. That's a tough one. You need to kind of decide whether this person you're working for is, they just skirt the edges, or they're just flat out psychopath. And psychopaths are easier because you can just leave. And so one is kind of a gray, like, oh, come on, you're always almost ethical, just not quite there, but not enough to leave. That's a great question. I don't know. One thing I found that we really encourage our organization is to find mentors throughout the organization. My mentor was not the president of my bank, it was somebody else. So I had a situation like that. I went to talk to some senior officer and said, hey, what do I do with this? And he was great, telling John, walk me through it. And I just need to tell somebody. So find a mentor, somebody more senior to you that you feel really good about. I've had mentors my whole life. I mean, people that didn't know my mentors. And I've had the best of the members, and I would talk to them. I think, what do I do on this? And I could not be where I am today without my mentors. Because they're just critical. That's a really good question. We all love that. What would you do? What did you do?
I probably erred on the side of deferring to authority, and that's why it's kind of a question that lingers with me is too, what is the appropriate path? Because if you make the wrong decision and you piss off the person ahead of you, then you can really do some damage to your career. So it's a hard area to be in.
Yeah, I mean, these people would say, you just quit. You just leave. I go, no, that's not the answer. You figure out, if you go somewhere else, it's going to be even worse. You figure out some way to work around that, and figure out, because you're going to be unethical people.